As an example, I saw an advertisement for an agency, like lead gen person, that had talked about the fact that he had grown his agency from $25,000 a month to $250,000 a month. And the thing that I thought was interesting in having looked at what it was that he was talking about was that he had sold a client doing a lot of media buying, and he was including the revenue that ultimately was not his. So technically he didn't lie. But of that $250,000 that he had ended up selling, that he was now doing per month, there was only $30,000 worth of revenue in totality. So he'd actually only grown his revenue by a few grand a month, but he had sold a lot of media dollars, which in reality does not actually help you do anything in business. Everyone, today I wanted to talk to you about something that I see that is causing real confusion and honestly some meaningful damage in the agency world. And it's the idea of scaling fast. So everywhere you look, there's this scale this, 10x that, rocket ship growth, and everything feels bombastic. And sure, maybe it sounds exciting theoretically, but in reality for most agencies, trying to scale too quickly leads to stress, broken systems, short-lived momentum, and ultimately a lot of destruction. And so there's a difference between something being scalable and something being able to be built to sustainably grow. And I want to talk about both. I want to talk about this myth of scaling fast. I want to talk about what it would actually take to go through this fast, scalable model, what real scalability looks like, and how to build a growth engine and a system of operations that doesn't blow up when you hit the gas. And so let's start with that hype problem. And I think that a scale is often, misunderstood and confused with speed and not sustainability. I also want to mention that there's the idea too that I think that is plaguing so many people of that you're supposed to want scale. You're supposed to want to build an empire. And that if you're not wanting that, there's something wrong with you. And that's just not true. Want what you want, and you should be able to have exactly what you're looking for. And if you want a lifestyle business and you're happy with that, providing for sustainability, providing for financial security for your family, that is perfectly fine. You don't need to scale for the sake of it. And I see a lot of people that it creates hesitation, it creates fear, it creates false senses of urgency that ends up creating for bad decision making, that ends up putting extra fuel on the fire in a specific area. It has them taking their eyes off of the ball in their own delivery. It has them removing themselves from pieces that they shouldn't be removing themselves from yet. It has them chasing vague concepts without clear targets or understandings or plans or strategies or measurements of what it is that they need to be doing. There's the social media industry, really, or the social media platforms, is creating for this narrative, this overhype of these kind of unicorn-oriented stories that frankly are just not the norm of how people have grown. And frankly, following Supreme Court's decision on Chevron's deference, that there's a lot less regulation that is going on in advertising at the moment, and a lot of litigation that will eventually have to ensue over time. But there's a lot more bombastic claims that are going around on social media now, and some of them being meaningfully not true. As an example, I saw an advertisement for an agency, like lead gen person, that had talked about the fact that he had grown his agency from $25,000 a month to $250,000 a month. And the thing that I thought was interesting in having looked at what it was that he was talking about was that he had sold a client doing a lot of media buying, and he was including the revenue that ultimately was not his. So technically he didn't lie. But of that $250,000 that he had ended up selling, that he was now doing per month, there was only $30,000 worth of revenue in totality. So he'd actually only grown his revenue by a few grand a month, but he had sold a lot of media dollars, which in reality does not actually help you do anything in business, in your agency. And you and I both know that that's not actually scaled at all. That's just nominal growth. But now you have someone that is trying to sell you on something, this idea of scale, that ultimately one has not accomplished it, but is now feeling like they need to one up the last advertisement that is creating for this hyper hype and just frankly just a load of hyperbole. And they're creating for this idea that you are failing if you're not accomplishing it, that you are doing wrong if you haven't done so. But the reality is that they are just trying to one up the last person producing an advertisement. I mean, the amount of crazy offers I've seen on social media is insane, and it is creating for the wrong dynamic for so many of you. And I wanted to hit that first, this idea of scale, the hype that is coming around, and the problem that it is causing internally for so many. It is causing the wrong choices. And so let's talk about what ends up happening if you end up scaling too fast. And I've seen this happen where delivery ends up suffering, so quality ends up dipping, and your reputation takes a hit, which is a long-lasting problem that you then have to dramatically shift. It ends up creating for morale drops across the team because the systems are not ready for this amount of volume, so they end up needing to overwork themselves in order to accomplish it. So you end up having teams leaving, and you're quickly needing to replace them because frankly, 2-week notice period is not enough to replace anyone. So you're replacing someone incredibly rapidly. So you end up putting someone in that is not as qualified as the person that just left, that is now needing to work even more so, or you're needing to put in the overflow of work there to allow for things to happen meaningfully. You now have created a situation where you've hired so rapidly before revenues come in meaningfully. So now you're creating for cash flow and predictability, potentially high revenue, low profitability, because you're throwing money at this growing problem that you were not really prepared to manage. And so now you're running into cash flow issues where a lot of businesses theoretically were profitable, quote unquote, and it might have been small amounts of profit, but they were profitable at the point that they closed their doors because cash flow is actually the predominant killer for a lot of businesses. So you've created for revenue chaos, financial chaos, cash flow chaos, operational chaos, reputational damage by doing this too fast when you're not ready to do so. And all you ended up doing was scaling chaos. So your operational chaos has increased because your infrastructure was not designed, built, ready for this amount of growth. And the reality is that there's these big pivotal shifts operationally in the agency world. Typically around 500,000, between 500 to 750,000, there's a reasonable shift in operations. Again, happens around 3, again happens around 7, and then again around 10, between 10 to 15, depending on the service lines that you ultimately have. And it's important to recognize that there's these plateau moments that are created because of these operational shifts that are necessary. And you need to make sure that you understand that and that it's actually a part of it. And you can go quickly through it. I'm not saying that you can't, you absolutely can. But if you are wanting this idea of scale, fast-oriented personality, and that's what you're looking for, know what you're in for. And I'm not trying to dissuade you from it. I just want you to know what you're getting into. If you're going to go through that, I want you to think version 1, version 2, version 3, and not just like launch and pray that it works. I want you to think, here's what version 1 looks like, and then we can do this next, and then we can do this next, and then we can do this next, especially if you're growing very, very, very rapidly, is that you do need to be a couple of steps ahead no matter what. The same thing is true with sustainable growth and being able to do things a bit slower, more consistent, more structured, more iterative. I think it's, frankly, my preference is I'd much rather grow more sustainably and grow smarter than just like blowing it out of the water and having quick momentum and not very sustainable, because I've seen a lot of people just blow it out of the water from a revenue perspective and then drop back down incredibly afterwards, and having maybe a year or 2 of this higher revenue number and then not knowing how to manage the business after it has shrunk back down and ultimately end up going out of business. And frankly, for you, I would hope that you have the business, if you haven't sold it, that you have the business for the longer term. And so I see it as more trial, error, feedback, implementation, building these feedback loops in early to your business that allow for you to be able to make refinements, adjustments, and improve upon what's actually happening, building systems, not just like throwing effort and hours at things. Scale, frankly, it's the scale that works. And the scale that works is not untested. It is methodical. It is thoughtful. It is programmatic. It is operational. It is not the fun, shiny things of just selling revenue, of the things that they're talking about online. And without the back office infrastructure that is necessary, it creates for a lot of problem. I mean, there's been the amount of agencies that I've worked with that have grown into the 8-figure plus space have done so with a lot of operational prowess and have done so with a lot of small iterative adjustments that were happening over time and having meaningful profit, really truly financially stable while being able to grow meaningfully. And the reality is for most of you listening, and I'm thinking about one specific agency at the moment, she is in the 3+ million, 3.5 million, I want to say last year in profit. And for most people, and I'm not saying every single one of you, but for most people, $300,000 of profit, even taking away half of it, we'll say for taxes, which isn't the case for her, it's less, but we'll take half away of taxes, 150 grand a month after tax is a meaningful amount of profit and enough for you to be able to put meaningful numbers away for retirement and wealth growth while being able to live a pretty good life. And she's continuing to grow and continues to want to, but is doing so in a sustainable, programmatic way. And she was one of the ones that had this idea that I just wanted to throw it out of the water. And we had to slow her down a bit to allow for her to create for that profitability. And had she grown to the same number exactly where she was without that operational prowess, it would have been the distinction of her being at 800,000 worth of profit. Not that that's something to be upset and cry yourself to sleep over. That's still a meaningful amount of revenue, of income for one individual, but there's a substantial difference between 800,000 and 3.5 million. So let's talk about what scalability looks like in a sustainable model. So scalability ultimately means the ability to be able to grow without breaking what already is working. So you have a mechanism by which to keep quality control in place. You have processes, systems, checklists that allow for things to be happening in the regular cadence. Those proven processes have clear accountability, healthy delivery margins, are clear of who is responsible for what. So very clear kind of racy chart oriented things, being very clear on that. They have clean ops, they have solid project management, they have consistent financial reporting. They are clear of what cash flow looks like. They're clear on projections of what's going on. They know their capacity. They are clear on their pricing models. They're clear on their profit targets. They have a meaningful amount of reporting layer, but accountability layer that allows for the management and leadership team at that agency to be able to see what's going on in any given moment to manage the agency meaningfully. And so they have all of these frameworks and things in place. So they know what the different variables. So what is the revenue per head? What is their client LTV? They understand what their target margins are on each individual project. They understand how many hours it's supposed to happen. They understand when projects are supposed to come to an end. They understand when projects are going over and what that ultimately means for each individual project. They're watching each one of these things and making decisions more pragmatically. They're not just willy-nilly growing hand over fist without these frameworks in place. And frankly, it'd be the idea if you were to want to build a house, but haven't poured any of the foundation first. And that's what a lot of people are trying to do when you're looking at this scale fast oriented side of the internet. The hormozi effect of agency world that I'm seeing happening right now is that it actually creates for a lot more tumultuousness. And I've had several people having gone to different types of groups and conferences and things in the recent years and having come out of it inspired theoretically to scale, but the very wrong mindset and the very wrong decision making that ended up coming to us to try to help them solve the problem that had been created for this idea of scale. And so if you do want this massively scalable model, and again, like I said, if you do want it, that's perfectly fine. It just changes how you have to go about things, but you do need to plan your growth. You have to know the variables. You have to be very clear on what those delivery frameworks look like, who's going to need to be involved, when you're hiring full-time people, when is it contractor oriented. You need to prioritize the systems, the checklist, the processes to allow for ease of delegation, repeatability in what it is that you're doing. But you need to document your systems and processes now. You cannot wait for chaos to force you into it because frankly, at that point, it very well is likely too late. You need to build those systems into it now. You need to understand what's actually going on step by step within the business. Because if you're wanting to triple the size of your business, let's say over the course of the next couple of years, and great goal if that's what you're looking to accomplish, but that means that you are going to have to be much further removed from what's going on. From an analogy perspective, if I were to be 100 yards away from something, and now I'm going to have to be 300 yards away from something, I'm going to have a much harder time being able to see what's going on because you're not close enough to it. And that's the reality of what it is that you're going to need to be doing. And if you do not have the systems in place that is going to monitor and bubble something up to you to allow for it to become closer to you, you are creating for a prison. You are not creating for a business that is going to give you the freedom that you are thinking it's going to. It really isn't. And the danger that happens in building too big too soon is you end up hiring before you have the meaningful demand. So it ends up causing cash drain and a lot of emotional weight of having to let people go when that eventually may become the case. You over deliver on the work that you're doing because you didn't price right. So you have broken margins and it actually is causing a lot of problems. You're over marketing with poor operationals. So you end up with a lot of churn in your clients because you're over promising and under delivering, which ends up having reputational damage and it's not actually creating for growth. You're always constantly having to churn those new revenue dollars that's causing a lot of problems. You're kind of busy, but it doesn't actually mean you're building any value. And it doesn't mean that you're focusing on a smart leverage within the business. And so what I really want for you is the sustainable growth wins, so that you have a refined, repeatable system, that you don't chase scale. You build a foundation that deserves that scale, which creates a need for operational prowess. And again, like I said, this is not the traditional thing that most people talk about on the internet, that is like the sexy, fun, jazzy thing. It just isn't. But to me, being able to create a system that allows for the work to be performed to the degree that you are proud of, that produces the impact to the client that you wanted to without you being involved, and allows for you to be able to make money, your business to be sustainable, for you to have comfort going to bed tonight and waking up tomorrow without the worry of it. I don't know that there is something that is frankly sexier in business than that. And so many people are focused on the wrong component of it. And don't get me wrong, revenue generation is necessary. And we will have episodes this season specifically on revenue and lead generation and the things you need to be thinking about there. But I do want to make sure that you're creating the space for creativity, quality, team sustainability, and really having the kind of profit first oriented model, with operational clarity being there as a built-in component of it. And then after you have operational clarity, financial frameworks in place, accountability working, then go ahead and grow meaningfully, but do it in that order. But also know that there is a glass ceiling that you're going to run into, and operational systems need to shift and change. We as leaders are often that glass ceiling when we need to have and learn a new skill to be able to get to that next stage of growth. It causes for this tension. And the objective that I wanted to have you guys walk away from this episode with is, what do I actually want? What do you actually want in your business? And frankly, here's the truth. Fast growth isn't a flex. Scalable means building in a way that works better with every iteration. It means that your business grows in strength, not just in size. And if you are an agency owner consistently feeling the pressure to grow faster, I want you to ask yourself this: is my business today built to scale? Are you trying to skip steps, trying to hit the easy button and not actually put the work in to make that growth sustainable, scalable growth possible? And sustainable growth, in my view, is the real win, because that's when you get it right. That's when scale becomes the outcome, not the goal. It's the thing that is created. It's the byproduct of it, and allows for you to have a more meaningful, not free, but stress light life. And that's what I would want for you. Whatever it is that your end outcome is, and I'm not trying to tell you that you should want scale, that you want an empire and you're needing to fly private. And if that's what you want, more power to you. But what is your goal? What is the thing that you need to do to accomplish that goal? And if your goal adapts and changes over time, that's totally fine as well. But I want you to have the ability to feel comfort in your business. Know that it is reliable enough. I mean, there's always some component of variability out there in the world, but that you feel comfort in where your business is headed and what it is creating for you. Hey everyone, thank you so much for listening in today. With all of the shifts in the industry, it is easy to feel overwhelmed or unsure of your next move. So I'm not here to try to sell you anything. I just want to give back and guide you through the uncertainty. Whether you're navigating new trends or just need some clarity, we're here to listen and offer advice. Head to creativeagencysuccess.com/chat to book a free 15-minute chat with an agency mentor who can provide you with a fresh perspective. Let's figure out the best steps for your agency's growth together.